Okay, good. All right, great. I'm going to just do a quick 10-minute setting some context, then Ron and I are going to have a conversation. So today, I want to talk about something that's bigger than is often looked at the areas of scrutiny in the EU around technology, bigger than privacy, bigger than competition, is essentially how is technology actually shaping the geopolitical world outcomes? The culture, our society, our children, how is it actually its own driving force in the world? Similar to how you might say that big oil is its own driving force of world events. So to do that, looking back, my favorite thinker, E.O. Wilson, said that the real problem of humanity, if you zoom out, is that we have Paleolithic emotions from the Stone Age, we have medieval institutions, and we have godlike technology. This is from E.O. Wilson. And I want to zoom in to these Paleolithic emotions. When I was a kid, I was a magician, which teaches you how to exploit people's Paleolithic emotions. The last panel was beautifully setting up the idea that our brains are biased. You can't change your biases. You're living inside of hardware that you can't escape. And magic is all about exploiting that. And often in technology, at conferences like this, we talk about, oh, let's look out for the moment when technology crosses human strengths. That's when it's smarter than us. That's when it can beat a radiologist at detecting cancer. That's when you get the singularity, when technology exceeds human strengths. We miss the much earlier point when technology hijacks human weaknesses. And I want to explain to you why I think in this point being crossed is the result of most of the things that we really are seeing going wrong in society. When technology exploits our cognitive limits, we feel that as a problem called information overload. When technology exploits our dopamine system, the reward center, we feel that as addictive use, the slot machine pull to refresh again. When it exploits our social validation, we feel that as why is everybody narcissistic, wanting to take selfies? Why does every teenager need to care about how many followers they have? It's because we exploited social validation. When it exploits confirmation bias, we feel that as fake news, affirmation, not information. When it exploits our outrage, we feel that as polarization. And when it exploits the foundation of our trust, your brain has very simple heuristics and shortcuts that it uses to figure out what is true, how do I trust something. If you hack that, you get bots and deepfakes. So look at these problems on the right-hand side. What are seemingly separate problems can all be explained by one diagnosis, which is the hacking and exploiting of our Paleolithic biases and weaknesses. And if you look at the fallout from each of these problems, you get shortening attention span, social isolation, teen depression and suicide, breakdown of sense-making, and a post-truth world. I'm sorry to be so depressing, but I want to show that these are not separate problems. They live as a connected system of harms, like the climate change of culture, because they're mutually reinforcing. And this system of harms is actually steering the outcomes of every major election, the culture of your children, and where the world goes. We call this system of harms human downgrading, the climate change of culture, because it's downgrading human capacity. So what I want to talk about today is how this system specifically impacts truth and how this is kind of a digital dark age if we don't actually do something to stop it. To do that, let's take a look at YouTube. YouTube has 2.1 billion users. That's about the size of Christianity. Okay? Jacked in for hours a day. Maria Ressa, who gave a talk earlier, says that in the Philippines, people spend up to 10 hours a day on social media. And on YouTube specifically, they spend about 1 billion hours a day. So 1 billion hours of watch time is steered. And 70% of that watch time is from the machine at YouTube calculating, what can I show your nervous system? What can I dangle in front of your brain that's going to keep you watching? And it's making really good predictions. Now, the problem with this is if you imagine a spectrum, imagine we lined up all the trillions and trillions of videos on YouTube on a spectrum. And on one side, we had the calm section. We had David Attenborough, we had Walter Cronkite, we had the Carl Sagan, whatever you calm rational science. And on the other side, you have Crazy Town. You have conspiracy theories, UFOs, Alex Jones, extremism, etc., white nationalism. No matter where you start a human being, what is YouTube's goal? What do they want from you? They want you to watch more. So which direction are they going to steer you no matter where you start? They're always going to steer you that way. So imagine that we just tilted the entire ant colony of humanity, 2 billion people, that direction. 3 examples for you. If you had a teen girl 2 years ago watching a dieting video on YouTube, it would recommend anorexia videos. If you watched a 9/11 news video, it would recommend 9/11 conspiracy theories. And if you watched a moon landing, it would recommend flat Earth conspiracy theories. Now, flat Earth might sound kind of funny, but here's an example. Even famous basketball player Kyrie Irving in the United States said he's sorry in a public hearing for saying that he thought the Earth was flat. He blamed it on a YouTube rabbit hole. When he said publicly, I really apologize for believing this, students who had listened to his interview said now they believe that the round earthers had gotten to him, which shows you that conspiracy thinking is very powerful. In fact, including in the Philippines, there is a link between the populist movement there and the deliberate use of the flat Earth conspiracy theory because it dismantles trust in all of science and institutions. It's very easy to overlook this, but I want you to think about this for a second. If the Earth is actually flat, it means that all of science has been lying to you. All of science. And YouTube recommended flat Earth conspiracy theories hundreds of millions of times. And what predicts if you're going to believe in a new conspiracy theory? What's the best predictor? Well, the research on this is that a robust finding from the research is that individuals who already endorse one conspiracy theory. So all I have to do is get you to believe one, and it's a doorway to get you to believe the rest. And that's why this is so dangerous, and it leads to this sort of digital dark age. Combine that with another fact from an MIT Twitter study that fake news spreads 6 times faster than true news. If you think about this as a system, false information is unconstrained, right? I can say anything. I can rearrange the words however I want. I can use more extreme word choices. If I'm only saying things that are true, I have to be very careful about exactly what I say, which words. So one actor is constrained, the other actor is unconstrained. The unconstrained actor wins, which means the more ruthless, more criminal, more outrageous, more extreme actor wins. And the reason why this matters to me the most is actually with climate change, and why I think all of you should care about this. I would actually argue that we can't solve climate change without solving this problem. Because technology is the sense-making layer for how 2 billion people figure out what's true. And if you typed into Google, climate change is, the recommendations in every country are different. This is actually from this morning, right here in Germany. You type climate change is, and the first results are not real, a hoax, a myth, or is natural. Okay? So billions of people are making sense of the world through these technology products. YouTube was found to recently be actively promoting more climate denialism. Specifically, 8% of videos completely deny that climate change is happening, and 45% of the top videos propagate total conspiracy theories. So if you hire 10,000 content moderators in English to try to catch some of the bad apples, right? I guess I have to be catching on this side. That's not going to work, right? There's not enough people. How many engineers at YouTube speak the 22 languages of India, or speak the languages of the developing world countries, or in Myanmar, where there was a genocide because of fake news being spread deliberately by the government about the Muslim Rohingya population? So this is a really serious thing that is affecting 2 billion people and eroding the information ecology and eroding our trust environment. This is not about addiction. It's about changing the way that we make sense of the world and our ability to find consensus. Okay, so how do we fix this? How do we fix it? Do we turn off notifications? Go grayscale? These are things that we were talking about years ago. This is obviously like being in a burning building of climate change. Everything's burning down around you. You're like, I know, let's ban plastic straws. Like, this is not the scale of intervention that we need. We need something truly systemic. And so to do this, what I really think we have to do is create a global understanding for how technology distorted society. We have to see that we've been put under this sort of hypnotic trance of radicalization, conspiracy thinking, extremism, and we have to change it. We have to ban the surveillance capitalism business model in the long run, and we need EU's government help to do that, which is why I came out here. We need to enforce interoperability and fund and research humane technology, which specifically is basically designed to protect human vulnerabilities, because that's the cause of these problems. So humane technology, we have to embrace our Paleolithic emotions, upgrade our medieval institutions, and have the wisdom to wield godlike technology. And now I think Rana and I are going to have a conversation about what that looks like.
Awesome.
Cool. Let me grab my...
So thanks so much for that presentation, Tristan. I'm so pleased to be with you again on stage. We've done a couple of these acts together in recent years. I'll just say quickly, I'm sure all of you know Tristan's amazing work at the Center for Humane Technology. I got to know him a couple of years ago, and you were actually one of the main inspirations for my book. I met you right around the time I started my job at the Financial Times. I had begun looking into monopoly power and corporate concentration in the tech sector. I had discovered that 80% of corporate wealth was living in just 10% of firms, most of which were the most sort of acute firms in this attention economy, in this surveillance economy. But at the same time, something personal happened to me. I came home one day and I looked at my credit card bill and I saw all these tiny charges in increments of, $1.99, $3. And I thought, my God, I've been hacked. And then I began to think of it more closely and I thought, who else has my password? My 10-year-old son, Alex. I met Tristan at just that time that he had run up $949 of charges in a single month playing FIFA Mobile. So, his virtual Ronaldo was right at the top of the league, but this was, to me, a very powerful explainer of where we are now. Kids my son's age are online in this attention economy for an average in the US of 7.5 hours a day. So in the 2 years that you've been going around talking about all these things, talking now to some of the leaders of the top tech companies, what has changed, what has not changed? Where are we over that time?
Well, it's funny being here at DLD because Steffi had invited me 2 years ago to be here when we were just first talking about time well spent. And one thing that's changed that might be more hopeful is, all of you have the screen time features on your phone that shows you how many hours a day you spend on your phone. I don't want to celebrate that as too much success because it's like the banning the straws. It's very, very, very small. But on 2 billion phones, there's now a cultural basic awareness of time is out of our control, and you can actually now see it. And we helped cause that to happen. That actually came directly from the kinds of advocacy that people in this sort of time well spent movement had created. We're seeing people inside the companies wake up from, when you and I met, this was not even on the front pages, ever.
Right.
Like, people weren't talking about the tech companies as steering every major election. We weren't talking about information warfare. We weren't talking. And now, every single day, you see this. I was reading a headline just a month ago that there's now 70 countries that are the target of disinformation campaigns. We've now found 70 countries where there's active disinformation campaigns going. So I think the awareness is there. I think government's awareness is there. I think people are just now asking, what can we do about it? I think a lot of people also in the tech industry are finally, frankly, being led through processes where they're having to reckon with what they've created. That there's this sort of Frankenstein that they can't control.
Well, this is interesting because this gets into one of the biggest sort of activism factors in this conversation right now, which is the workers themselves. You are seeing kind of wholesale rebellion inside companies like Google. Facebook is terrified this is going to happen there. You talk to a lot of workers in a lot of companies. What are they saying? What are they hearing? And are they starting to really drill down on what might the alternatives be to a surveillance capitalism model?
So there's a problem, which is, can you change the business model of a $500+ billion company, or in Google's case, $1 trillion market cap company, after the DNA is already baked? Sort of like asking, can you turn a duck into a chicken after the DNA is already there? We haven't yet invented CRISPR for organizations, but that would be the kind of thing that we're asking for. So you can't really change the business model, but in terms of changing the immediacy and urgency of the issues, I don't know how many of you saw that Facebook's own employees wrote a letter to Mark Zuckerberg saying, the line was, "This is still our company." And then they outlined why they disagreed with the ads policy, the political ads policy. And those kinds of letters, which happened, I think, back in October, are the most encouraging sign I've seen that change is happening. Because much faster than regulation changing what tech companies do, because that takes a while to write the law, then to pass the law, and then have it come into effect. That'll be 3 years from now. We have an election in the United States coming up, obviously, this year. It's just not fast enough. So the fastest lever of change is the people on the inside themselves. And that has changed so much in the last few years. We host these small convenings and create safe spaces for people to talk and share information. And I've been hearing from people themselves that they say that the biggest thing that's changing and that they want more pressure is for the recruiting pipeline to change. So if Facebook has a hard time, hiring new people because they don't want to work there because it has a bad reputation, that makes them have to show good faith efforts to change what they're doing.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the juxtaposition between regulation, which definitely takes time, but is happening. I mean, particularly in Europe, and is also necessary, is happening in Europe, is happening in California, is happening in different places. There's often debate that's couched as, look, this is a battle between innovation and regulation. To me, it's really about innovation versus corporate concentration. And one of the things that I am very concerned about is that our ability to deal with the topics that you're bringing up is starting to intersect with a global trade war, with the U.S.-China tech trade battle in particular. In Washington, there is a big lobbying campaign right now on the part of the largest tech platform giants to say, look, you can't break us up, you can't make us change our business models. We are the national champions in this battle of the future against China. Unclear yet where Europe's going to fall in that, but Europe is getting pressure from both sides. How does all that start to factor into how change can be made? How are you thinking about these issues?
It's exactly as you said. When you and I last were together, we were with Kai-Fu Lee, and we were talking about the U.S.-China sort of dynamics and all of this. Facebook's and Google are both telling Washington, don't regulate us because we're the only defense you've got against China taking over, and which is already happening with TikTok, going after, which is the most successful app for teenagers right now, right? So basically, I was actually just talking to someone who worked for the NSA, and their daughter used TikTok all day, and it's like, China's in your kids. It's like, imagine if China was writing your kids' textbooks. As you said, kids are spending more time with their devices than they are in the hours at school, right? And so if you say, well, what are the apps that they're using, and when other countries can basically create those spaces, it's really dangerous. But like you, I mean, we're trying to play this 17-dimensional chess game and say you don't just want to regulate them and then live in a authoritarian world. At the same time, I think that Facebook has done more to polarize, damage our information environment and polarize our politics, leading to things like civil war dynamics, where you have the hashtag civil war is coming. Prior to the EU elections in May of last year, right, there was one of the top recommended YouTube videos was a civil war is coming in Europe. And that's because you can manipulate the recommendation system. This is actually really critical for just a second. When the Mueller report came out about Trump, the Mueller report, which YouTube channel's coverage was most recommended? It was Russia Today. And do you know how they do that? Because they have these bot farms that basically will watch video A, and then they have all these servers go watch video B. So YouTube's sitting there being like, well, let's learn what people tend to watch that keeps them watching. Oh, there's this huge surge of traffic. If people start with this video, they always watch this other one that keeps them there for an hour. Now we'll start recommending that, not knowing that Russia can basically manipulate the recommendations. So
when we start to talk about things like this and all the nefarious possible things that can happen on platforms, CDA 230, gets brought into the conversation. That's, as I'm sure everybody knows, the loophole from 1996 in the Communications Decency Act that allows platforms to not be liable like a newspaper or a more traditional broadcaster would for what happens on the platforms. Do you think that needs to be overturned?
I do. I think we have to it's a very delicate thing to do. You might have seen Democratic the candidate, I don't know what you call him, Joe Biden said that Section 230 needs to be completely revoked. And that kind of rhetoric is very powerful. So if you don't know, Section 230 is basically the thing that says that content platforms are not responsible for any of the videos or content that show up on their platform. So if it's white nationalism, if it's conspiracy theories, if it's flat earth, it's not their fault. They are not supposed to do anything. And it's a huge problem when it comes to the scale that these platforms are operating at. Another one is the FTC. There's certain ways that I think their jurisdiction can apply to tech platforms that you only need 3 commissioners to take some action there. But Europe is a really important player in this space, and since the United States has basically copied GDPR for the California Consumer Privacy Act, I would love to see Europe move ahead on updating the way that these content protections work, and then have the U.S. copy that as well.
I'm going to be on stage actually in a couple of days in Davos with Rohit Chopra from FTC, so I will question him about this.
Please keep pushing.
Let me just ask in the couple of minutes that we have left. Hope. Where do we find the bright spots? I mean, because it does seem that there's been incremental changes, and every other week the tech platforms announce some kind of incremental change. But I think it's safe to say we're really no farther in terms of rolling back surveillance capitalism than we were 2 years ago. And in fact, it's now moving into almost every other area of our lives with the Internet of Things. I mean, Starbucks knows about you, Johnson & Johnson knows about you. Everybody is doing this same thing. So where do you find your hope, and how do you set your goals for the next 2, 3, 5 years?
It's hard. People always want an optimistic answer, but if you're actually honest with the situation, it's a really hard situation. You have $1.5 trillion of market value locked up and continuing to do what we're already doing. I recently was reading some of the history on slavery in the United States, and how actually in Britain it took, when they decided to get off essentially a business model of slavery, that it took them 60 years. And they cut down, they took 2% off their GDP every year for 60 years to get off of slavery. And there's many other moments in history when your entire economy is on a perverse infrastructure, whether it's the big oil, sort of situation or, whatever. That movement, that book is called Bury the Chains. I highly recommend people check it out. But in terms of recommendations or hope, I think the interesting thing is that there's never been more momentum. And for years, for people, we were having these conversations 3 or 4 years ago when nothing was changing. And looking back then, you would feel completely hopeless. But if I told you and I back then in that couch in Financial Times that 3 years later you'd have the co-founder of Facebook saying we need to break up Facebook, you'd have Facebook's own employees rebelling, you'd have Apple changing settings on smartphones for 2 billion people taking a first step. And one last area of hope is that Apple is kind of like the federal, like the government of the attention economy. They're like the Federal Reserve, and they're kind of minting attention without really taking responsibility for how they could actually alter this. They can actually do quantitative easing in a way that would change these dynamics.
That's a great analogy.
And they are actually in a really amazing position if there was enough public pressure. So.
Okay. All right, Apple, we're coming for you. We want more. I actually do feel more hopeful. Thanks for sitting here with me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.